One. So are we ready for the second round of our gubernatorial candidates conversations? Yeah? All right. So I was supposed to do about 5-7 minutes. I don't have 5-7 minutes worth of talking points that are fresh. So let me just tell a story, because I love this story. And it's a story that should inspire all of us. What I feel when I'm in a room like this is in the room of comrades. We're all fighting. We're all putting our shoulder to the wheel for our littlest ones. And I want to also share with you all that the next generation is also ready for this fight. My daughter, Naya, she's 10 years old now. When she was about 3.5, 4 years old, we took her to a preschool that was about, unfortunately, it's LA, so it takes you about 35 minutes to get there. Okay, every morning, 35 minutes. And like a good parent, I have her in the back seat. She is, strapped into her car seat. Just, that's what you do, right? I'm a dad. I'm a good dad. And, for a while, she really was focused on the story of Rosa Parks. She really, because we would tell her these stories of these civil rights leaders, and every morning she wanted me to tell her the story of Rosa Parks. And I would. I'll tell her about the strength of that woman to stand up against systemic racism. I'll talk about the strength of that woman to sit down when it was necessary to sit down. And after talking about the story and how unjust it was for people to sit in the back of the bus, my Naya starts to get a little upset. And I'm trying to think about why she's so upset. And she says, wait a minute, why am I in the back of the car? Why am I strapped in? And so that fire is coming up from that next generation. And so all we got to do here in this room is we just got to kick down the door, open the pathway, and that next generation's coming right in, okay? So now let's talk a little bit about where we're at in terms of this moment. So we have the top 4 candidates for the governor's race joining us over the last 2 days. Let's take a moment to just pause on that. It's early in the campaign season. It's pretty early for us to have this kind of conversation. And I think it says something about the power and cohesion of the education and ECE world to be able to kind of pull this thing off, right? Something that we may not have had 10 years ago, right? But we do today. So let me just pause and let's all give each other a round of applause for where we're at this point. So the legal stuff, let me get that out of the way. This event is not supporting any particular candidate. It is, as I've said yesterday, about setting the debate. All major candidates were invited. Those that accepted were given about 25 minutes over the 2 days. And so let me just end here with this. It's been a hard year for all of us. Yesterday's events in Las Vegas was just the latest of horrible events after horrible events. And I've decided for myself to take a pause in talking about 45 and his administration, to not always react to everything that comes out of the White House. Because sometimes you gotta turn down the noise and focus on the task at hand, okay? There are times when we have to stop reacting and playing defense and lean forward and play a little bit of offense. And in California, we have that opportunity to play some offense, right? Good. So, we have this in front of us, and it's not just about this next election cycle, this next year. We have the opportunity beyond that to really seize our state's future. This forum shows what we can do when we bring it all together, when we collectivize our strength. And regardless of who gets elected next year, if we stay connected, if we stay engaged and in community with one another, I'm certain that we will once again be able to call our state the Golden State, but this time to be the Golden State for everybody, right? All right, so with that, let's go ahead and get things started. We are going to invite one of our allies, our friends from the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, Pete, to speak a little bit about Choose Children.
Thank you, John. Thank you. And good morning, everybody. Thank you to Advancement Project for your leadership and setting the stage for these conversations. It's so important. And for all the advocates in the room who are gathered, because this is such an important conversation, because we have a lot to talk about. Because California, frankly, is failing our kids. We know this because we feel it every day, right? More than $1 billion have been cut out of early childhood programs over the past decade. And they're still underfunded by about $500 million from where they were in 2008. And in 2008, that wasn't enough. So it's really time that we get a champion in the governor's office who understands, because California, as all of you know and live every day, has the highest rate of children living in poverty in the nation. And if California were its own country and a member of the OECD, it would have the fifth, almost the fourth, largest economy in the world. But among those same countries, it would have the highest rate of children living in poverty in the world, right behind Romania. That's not right. And we understand that that's not right. And all the people gathered in this room understands that that is not right. And we have champions in the legislature who understand that is not right. We just need a governor as well who understands that that is not right. So 2018 presents a really unique opportunity for us to take advantage of. We're having an election for a new governor, for a new champion for children, and that is what we're all about. So we're proud to launch Choose Children 2018, which is really an initiative led by Silicon Valley Community Foundation with the support of many partners throughout the state to make sure the next governor of California is that champion for kids from day 1 to day 1,460 after their first 4-year term and beyond, to make sure that we create a drumbeat to make sure kids and families are supported in this state. We're proud to have the support of Santa Barbara Foundation, San Diego Foundation, the LA Chamber of Commerce, California Community Foundations, Local First Fives, and many other local donors who are making this initiative happen. But we really cannot make it happen without your help and support. So please visit our website at www.choosechildren.org to go download our fact sheet, our toolkit, our poll results. We conducted a statewide poll to really start and galvanize the grassroots towards this effort to making sure that our next governor is a champion for kids. This is not a Silicon Valley only effort, right? This is not like Juicero. This is not like a $400 juice machine that's going to go out of business, you know. We are in the business of electing a governor that will care about little kids and families. So we can't do it without your support, and thank you for the opportunity to have this stage. And without further ado, I will introduce our next speaker, Khadijah. Thank you.
The first 5 years have so much to do with the next 80. Research has shown that early education is an investment. Study after study after study reaches the same conclusion. President Obama, in his 2013 State of the Union address, pledged to work with states to make high-quality preschool available to every single child in America, and I refuse to believe that we have a new president. And in 2016, for the first time in US history, Hillary Clinton, a leading presidential candidate, made early childhood education the signature issue of her presidential campaign. President Obama got it, Hillary Clinton got it, and now we want to make sure that our next governor gets it. During these gubernatorial conversations, we look forward to hearing from the candidates about their vision for our state's birth through 12 education system. The next leader of our state has an enormous responsibility to continue leading the California way. He or she will also have an opportunity to make the education system better for those who continue to be left behind. Given the context of the federal political landscape, the next governor has an opportunity to push back on inhumane and unwise policies that are trickling down from the Trump administration, and also proactively lead California towards progress. And that progress cannot and should not ignore our children. With that, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Antonio Villaraigosa. Antonio Villaraigosa truly understands what it means to struggle, fail, fight, get back up and succeed. He has been doing that since his childhood. He almost lost his ability to walk at the age of 16. He also understands what it means to get a second chance. He understands what it means to have an adult who believes in you when others give up on you. Antonio was given a second chance by his public school teacher. He understands that it's okay to fail only so you can get back up towards a path to success. He understands that because he lost his first bid for mayor, but then became the 41st mayor of Los Angeles in 2005, a role he served until 2013. Before that, he served the people of Los Angeles in his capacity as an assembly member and as a councilman. For his gubernatorial campaign, Mr. Villaraigosa wants to rebuild middle class by investing in schools and repairing our infrastructure. He has made it a priority to invest in our infrastructure like roads, bridges, transportation, ports, and waterways. Mr. Villaraigosa, it is my hope that this list also includes the human infrastructure, our youngest learners, our children. It is my hope that this human infrastructure is at the forefront of this list of roads, bridges, and ports. It is my hope that this human infrastructure is prioritized in the form of funding for early childhood education programs. Now, it is truly my honor to introduce to you the Honorable Antonio Villaraigosa.
Hadija, right? Hadija? Thank you. Thank you, Hadija, for that very generous introduction. I also want to share a little bit about why I have a passion for this issue and these issues. I said a year ago to Kim Patillo-Brownson, who I know will be speaking later today, when asked if I would come, I said I would. And I would in no small part because I recognize what the future holds if we don't do something dramatically different from what we're doing today. You mentioned my background. I grew up in a home of domestic violence and alcoholism, in a home of poverty, but I had a great mom. And I've always said it was a Catholic school that gave me a foundation, but a public school that gave me a second shot. But they didn't set high standards at the school that I went to. They put me in shop classes and basic reading and math classes. I dropped out of that school. Thanks to my mom and a great teacher, Herman Katz, I came back and graduated. I went to East LA College, and then because we had an affirmative action program that gave me a shot, I went to UCLA. I know I'm one of the fortunate ones. And my entire life in public service has been to make sure that there are more people who are fortunate, to open up the doors of opportunity, the doors that I've been able to pass through. I've said many times when you look at what's going on in California today, that this is the 6th largest economy in the world. Our economy was growing faster than the national average and faster than Texas and Florida combined. We just weren't growing together. The state with the highest poverty rate in the United States of America, and we just heard a new statistic, the highest poverty rate in the Western world, or at least one of the highest poverty rates. That's a distinction that I think everyone has to really think long and hard about. I'm running for governor because I understand that we could do better. I'm running for governor because I understand that in order to grow our economy, in order to create more middle-class jobs, we're going to have to educate more of our kids. He dicho muchas veces en español, y lo voy a decir en inglés, que el papel de primero no es golpear tu pecho y decir, soy tan único, soy especial. El papel de primero es abrir la puerta para los demás. I've said in Spanish many times, the role of the first is not to bang on your chest and say how great I am. The role of the first is to open up the door for the rest. I know what the faces of those kids who don't have early child care or preschool, what they look like. I know what their economic status. Disproportionately, they're poor. Disproportionately, they're of color. We'll be 1.5 million down the number of college graduates we need by 2030. 1 million down in the number of people with specialized skills. It starts at the beginning. I've said wherever I've gone, and as mayor and as a speaker before that in my entire life when I worked for the teachers union, that the education is the path to opportunity, to the path to success. But it starts in the beginning. I don't have to tell you that when a young kid starting from in the womb is hearing classical music, hearing words repeated, has a vocabulary from a very young age, by the time they start to kindergarten, I think the statistics are 2 million words or maybe even more than that, than someone who didn't have that opportunity. The next governor is going to have to focus on that. Focus on the notion that that preschool and childcare are a right, not a privilege. The only issue is how do we pay for it? I believe we got to grow the economy to do that. I believe that we got to make priorities in a budget. I was Speaker of the Assembly and mayor of the largest city in this state, a city that is very much like what the state looks like, rich and poor, a city of, 67% of LA comes from Asia, Africa, and Latin America, a city that had a broken school system. When I became mayor, 44% graduation rate, 1 out of 3 schools failing. By the time I left, 1 out of 10 schools failing, 72% graduation rate, now a 77%. But that's not good enough. And the way to improve K through 12 and more integration in our colleges is to start with early child care. I know that there's going to be an opportunity to sit down. I get 5 minutes. I think I've probably taken it, so I'd like to get right to the question and answer. I do want to say this. I think the best way to look at what someone's going to do is to see what they've done. When I was Speaker, I was a progressive who fought for poor kids. I worked with the Advancement Project. I was the first guy who saw that we were passing state school bonds, and the urban core was voting for them, and all these state bonds were building schools in the suburbs and in places where we didn't live. I changed that. Every bond since then was changed to reflect that. I said, poor kids, dilapidated, it can't just be new schools. We got to rebuild and modernize the schools in the poor neighborhoods. I was the guy that did that. When I was mayor, I stood up for the notion that Watts was worth it. I spent more time in Watts and South LA on the east side and the places that didn't have a mayor. Just as I've gone knocking on the door for your support, I'm spending time in the Inland Empire, in the Central Valley, where 3 of the top 5 cities with the highest poverty rate. LA, number 14, San Bernardino, number 9. If we're going to grow, we've got to grow together. We've got to invest in one another, and it starts with early child care and preschool. Thank you very much.
Good to see you.
Good to see you again. I had already shaken his hand, but that's why I said that.
This is the official handshake.
Yeah.
Well, good to be back here today, and good to see all of you, and welcome, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to go over the ground rules, such as they are. We're going to talk for about 15 minutes, try to get in as many questions as we can. And then we're going to open it up for about 5 minutes for questions from the floor, so get your questions ready. Let me just jump in to one of the struggles that's been going on in California for quite a few years, universal preschool. Some progress has been made, but the current governor has said we just don't have the money to expand it to all kids. Where would you stand as governor on that issue?
We do have the money. We just got to make universal preschool a priority. Start with, obviously, kids in poverty, move on as we transition. I'm committed to it. When I was Speaker of the Assembly, I've said many times that a budget is a reflection of what your values. It's a values document in many ways, and I think it is critical that we focus on growing together, and it starts with universal preschool.
One of the issues, of course, is where are the funds going to come from? Are you willing to go to the voters to ask for increased taxes, or where do you see the funding for not only preschool, but for early care in general?
I've supported raising taxes when appropriate. I'm certainly willing to do that. I think we have a broken tax system currently. As we all know, Prop 13 is broken. I didn't vote for it in 1978. I've spoken out against it my entire life in public service, as recently as a few months ago. But it's not just broken, there. When it was passed, commercial was paying 60% of the freight. Homeowners were paying 40%. Today, it's the inverse. You could sell property again and again and again, unlimited, not pay for it through REITs. The upper income tax is broken as well, though. A 3% cut in capital gains. It's a 20% cut to the budget, so our budget goes like this. And we're one of, I think some 30 some odd states have a service tax, and we don't, and it's the fastest growing part of the economy. So I would be willing to raise taxes if necessary. I'd also be willing to cut other programs where necessary, because I intend to be the governor that does implement universal preschool and starts the transition in the first year, not the fourth.
Do you think it's time to go, or the time is right to go back to the voters around Prop 13 and then deal with the commercial side of the equation?
I'd be willing to do that, but I was Speaker of the Assembly. I believe in the legislature and their responsibility. I think the legislature should do that. I'm not a big fan of initiatives, frankly. And I think with the 2/3 that we have in the legislature, there's going to be a willingness to address both Prop 13, but also the other areas of a broken tax system. Again, I think we need to be, when you look at the two bipartisan commissions that have looked at our tax system, they said it's broken all across the board. And I would be willing to do that through the legislature if necessary by initiative, but I think the legislature is up to the task, particularly now that we have a 2/3 majority in both houses.
While we're on the early years, I think there's now increasing focus and concern about the very early years, 0 to 3, the issue of infant care, toddler care, which is even less accessible to parents than preschool. What would you do as governor to deal with that issue? Because obviously, as you've indicated, the earliest years are
I think we got to start with the poor, but
you got to start with, sorry?
I think we got to start with people who live in poverty. But yeah, I do believe that society ought to provide. I mean, almost every Western industrialized nation has some form of early child care. We ought to join the club, and I think when you look at record, when you look at my record, and I think it's important to do that, you see the record of a guy who was always pushing the envelope, not afraid. I know there's a lot of talk because of yesterday about this issue of gun violence. I'm the author of the assault weapons ban in 1999, not 216. I've been doing this my entire life. So yes, I do believe that the state has a responsibility to provide that kind of care, and we're going to start with the people that need it the most and go forward.
One of the issues which I know is near and dear to a lot of people in this room is that early child care workers are really desperate.
Early what?
Child care workers and in preschools and lower are so terribly underpaid. State has made some movement to try to get some more funds to those workers, and that of course affects the whole quality issue. What would you do as governor to address that issue?
I think we've got to build on that. I do think they're underpaid, and I think we're going to, if we want the best and the brightest, we got to pay them more, and we also got to train them more. And I'm committed to doing that because I think training is a key issue for early child care, for preschool, but all through K through 12. We don't invest enough in our teachers. And I want to make a more significant investment in the people that are actually caring for and teaching our kids.
Let's
You're
move
on a
on to
timer, huh?
Timer.
Jesus.
It's a tough crowd here.
All the way from LA to Sacramento. I didn't Skype here today. And I got 5 minutes, you know.
Believe me.
True. And that's the reason why they're Skyping, by the way, because I showed up.
I fought to get more time, but I'm told the rules are the rules. Moving on to K-12.
Rules are made to be broken when they're not fair.
There you go.
I've been doing that my whole life, too.
That's on the record, right?
On the record.
Let me ask you, K-12. There's been a lot of reforms are in play right now. The local control funding formula, we got the Common Core. California, in many ways, is kind of on the forefront of that. Do you think we're on the right track when it comes to K-12? Should we stay the course with the reforms that are in play right now?
Well, if you're speaking to those two reforms, I support them both. I think we need to build on them. But are we on the right track? I think we need to do a better job. I mean, we're graduating about 80% of our kids. For Latinos and African Americans and kids in poverty, it's closer to 70%. About 13% of them are going to four-year colleges. We got a skills gap of 1 million by 2030. This state won't thrive nor survive with those kinds of numbers. So I think we need to do a better job of that, of what we're doing today. I think we need to set higher standards. I mentioned that it was a public school that gave me a second chance, which is why I believe in public schools. But they put me in shop classes and basic reading classes because that's what they did to people like me back then. And I want to set higher standards. When I left that high school in 1971, they had a 25% graduation rate. When I got elected in 2005, they had a 36% graduation rate. Today, I took over that school, by the way. They now have an 84% graduation rate. I think we're going to be close to 87 in a few days when the numbers come out, but we're at 84 today. We got to do a better job. We got to push ourselves, all of us. And it's going to start with the governor. This will be a governor who will make education an absolute priority. We're 44th or 42nd in per pupil spending. We're dead last in technology and library and virtually everything. We got to spend more and invest more. But we also got to do more with the money we got. I'm a big believer in that, and I think that we're going to have to convince people that we've got to invest in the next generation of Californians so that we can grow together in a better way than we have in the past.
Can I just drill down a little bit on local control funding formula, which has been one of the signature innovations, reforms of this governorship? A lot of concern, is that going to continue under the next governor?
It's going to continue, we're going to build on it. I think we need to do more. Look, my son had a mom with a master's in education, a teacher. A father who was the most powerful guy in town. He was. I came home one day. I was speaker, and he's listening to classical music. And I said, "What are you listening to, Bach?" And he said, "No, I'm listening to Handel." But I could see why you confused him, Dad. And shit, I didn't have any of that, That's why, he got to Princeton and I didn't, And the fact is, kids like me, the way I grew up, those kids need more than my kid. And I think we're going to have to build on what we've done, the local control funding formula, to make sure that those, kids have the resources that they need. So that they can compete with kids who grow up, in more affluent homes.
I wanted to ask you just about charter schools. Been a contentious issue in the state. California, by and large, has been quite friendly to charter schools. It's most charter schools, and proportionally a very high number. But in some districts, including LAUSD, this is a major issue, where there's a concern that there's too many charter schools. Do you think there should be any kinds of limits or controls on charter schools, particularly in districts where there are already a lot?
I was with the California teachers the other day, and we actually addressed that. And I wouldn't put a across-the-board prohibition on charter schools. I do think that I do support quality schools, quality charters, and quality traditional public schools. By the way, the 20 schools that the foundation that I founded runs, it's all union schools, traditional union schools, same contract. So I would say what I want to see are high-performing, quality schools, and I want to give parents choices. You know, my kids, and looking around the room, you know, many of our kids get a broad range of choices. Parents and children who live in poverty and in districts or neighborhoods where schools have been failing them for generations in some cases ought to be able to have those choices as well. So I wouldn't put a blanket prohibition. I certainly don't support for-profit charters. And I do think that when I talk about accountability, I think everybody should have accountability, and that would include them as well.
Suggesting a little more accountability for charter schools?
Yes, there could be. As I said in an interview just the other day, I said I would look at more accountability. I know there's been some self-dealing in a few charters. Hey, you ought to have the same conflict, rules that everybody else has. You shouldn't be able to self-deal. But I am very much for the notion that we have got to commit ourselves to higher standards and more choices for kids who historically haven't had them, at least since the 1960s or so.
One last question, then we're going to go to the floor. Local control. That's been another big, I'd say, innovation, pushing much more control to the local districts and schools. There are some concerns amongst advocates and others that maybe Sacramento has to be a little more prescriptive, that there's not enough accountability built into the current local control and accountability plans and so on. Where do you think we have the balance right where we are now? Or?
No, but I do believe in local control. I also believe that there needs to be a standard threshold of accountability. And, so that's a balance that you're going to have to strike. When I'm governor, obviously, we'll look at working with all the stakeholders to figure out where that balance is. But I'll tell you something. Where I'm going to side is with kids. Where I'm going to side is with the notion that these kids deserve the same shot that my kids got. And I feel strongly about that. And it's from time to time gotten me in, conflict with some, but I feel strongly we got to stand up for these kids, and that's how I feel.
Okay. Let's try to get in a couple of your questions. We'll start right here. Do you want to stand up, Shelley? Hang on, we're going to get the mic coming to you. Okay.
Good morning. Shelley Spiegel-Coleman from Californians Together. I know you know that last November we passed Proposition 58 with 73.5% of the electorate saying yes to multilingual programs. We'd like to know what your vision is for English learners and dual language learners in this area.
I supported it. I was one of the few people to take on Ron Unz back then. I debated him. I said that they were wrong. I had worked for the teachers. My ex-wife was a bilingual teacher. I understood that English language learners and black boys are the most impacted in our public school system, and they need more support, and the science is with bilingual teaching, and I support it. And my kids are fairly bilingual as a result.
Good afternoon. My name is Pablo Murillo, Area Representative.
I'm sorry.
Just speak up a little bit.
Pablo Murillo, Area Representative for UTLA, United Teachers of Los Angeles. When you talk about investing into poor communities, are you saying that you will facilitate the privatization of ECEs? Or are you saying that you will keep the public system public and make it the best?
I'm not sure I got all of it, but I'm for a public school system, and if you're talking about charters, I'm also for charters, which are public schools. I do think we need to fund them more. I do think we need to make greater investments in those schools. I do think we need to hold them accountable for success, but we need to do that together, and certainly want to do that with UTLA, CTA, AFT, and all of the charter folks as well. And my time's up.
Time's up.
Is that it?
I'm going to just squeeze in
No,
one
no
very,
extra
very,
credit
very
for coming, for flying in. Getting on a 7:10 flight from
Okay, we're going to
Burbank.
squeeze in one more question.
Squeeze in one more.
The issue of where California stands relative to other states in terms of what it spends on kids, and particularly K-12. We, as you indicated, way down below. Obviously, you can't just create funds with a magic wand, but do you see, while governor, do you see an opportunity to increase significantly where California stands?
I do, and I'll tell you how we do that. We've got to focus on growing this economy. The next governor has got to make growing the economy, and particularly growing middle-class jobs, a absolute priority. I think we also need to address the fact that it's very difficult to create jobs in this state, and for particularly small businesses to thrive. So I want to be supportive of that so that we can have the revenues. I want to be the education governor that's focused on early infant and child care, preschool, and K through 12, and addressing the college affordability issue, and it's going to take investment. If I have a bias, I want to do that first and foremost from the kids that without that funding just won't have a shot. They won't be able to have a smile like these beautiful kids have a smile behind me when they're grown-ups, because they'll be struggling. And I want them to have that smile on their face. So I do think it's possible. I'm certainly, if I have a priority, this is it. With your help, I hope to hit those funding levels and that kind of excellence. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you. I now wanted to call on Eric Hines to introduce Gavin Newsom. Eric?
Good morning. It's always great to look out here and see all of these people that are always so interested in early childhood and those beginning years, and that too often are forgotten in our system. And so it's always good to be up here to be addressing you. And we have been longtime partners of the Water Cooler Network, and in that time we've talked a lot about all the system changes that California is going through between the new standards and news testing and local control and all of these things that we're building here. And we talk a lot about the importance of building partnerships and collaboration to make sure that these changes are successful for every student in the state, regardless of the zip code they live in. During these gubernatorial conversations, We are really looking forward to hearing from the candidates about their vision for the K-12 system and for early childhood. We now turn to gubernatorial candidate Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom is California's Lieutenant Governor, serving his second term. Previously, he was the 42nd and youngest mayor of San Francisco, and my mayor, from 2004 to 2011. Before he was a member of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors from 1997 to 2004. As mayor, he prioritized issues of equality, education, the environment, homelessness, and healthcare. During his mayorship, San Francisco implemented a universal health care plan for the city's uninsured residents. With regards to education, he introduced the California College Promise and wrote the report on the state of higher education of California. For his gubernatorial campaign, he has prioritized the following issues: economic growth, education, energy, and the environment, and technology in the government. It is now my honor to introduce to you the Lieutenant Governor, Gavin Newsom.
The joys of technology. Thank you for being so patient with us. Right now, we're figuring out the sound, and as soon as it is back, you will obviously hear it. So just give us about a minute or two. Thank you for the patience.
All right.
There we go.
That work? You hear me? All right. So how's that? Can you hear me in the back? How are we doing? Is it good? All right. Thank you all. I know how frustrating it is to see someone on Skype. Nothing bothers me more. So I'm immeasurably grateful to all of you, and hopefully we can get through this and make this as constructive as possible for you. But again, thank you for hosting this event. Thank you for the opportunity to engage on such a profoundly important subject matter. And just very, very briefly, I was saying, you may not have heard me, that I had the privilege of serving as a mayor of not just a city, but a mayor of a county in San Francisco. And as a consequence of taking the oath of office around 2004, 2005, there was a big push in this country to take over school boards. There was a push certainly emanating from cities like New York and Chicago, a little bit in Boston. Obviously, it came out west into California. The urge was there for a lot of new mayors. And in San Francisco, that certainly presented itself. In the city, though, we chose a different path. But we decided instead of taking over the school board, asserting, quote unquote, mayoral control, that we would begin the process of building partnerships, developing a framework of engagement. We called those partnerships not just public-private partnerships, but public-public partnerships. And there's an important distinction between public-private partnerships and public-public partnerships. The whole idea was to strengthen the relationship, but also recognize our unique roles and responsibilities and delineation of authority. We actually entered into a memorandum with our independent school district called a partnership for achievement. It laid out a series of goals and strategies to strengthen the relationship between the city and county and the independent school district. It also set out a course to do some things that, frankly, were quite novel for cities to do. As many of you may know, San Francisco is the only city at scale that's not debating the importance of early childhood education, preschool for all. San Francisco in 2008 achieved that goal. It didn't just assert it. It implemented a preschool for all program. We made investments in arts education. Every child, every classroom, K through 12, we put arts education back in the schools. We recognize the importance of blended interventions, something I know all of you care deeply about, that health education linkage, by putting wellness centers back into our public schools to deal not only with physical health needs, but adolescent mental health needs. We built strong partnerships that allowed us to pay our teachers more, to celebrate, not just tolerate our teachers, looking at our teachers not as sparring partners, but working partners, to deal with the demoralization that often is attached with the profession that's being attacked day in and day out, not just by members of one particular party, but sadly, members of all political parties. We built relationships, and in turn, we built, I think, a framework for engagement that now is best described as community schools. We call them full-service community schools, and it's a framework that I want to engage and advance throughout the entire system. I'm a passionate supporter of preschool for all. I'm a passionate supporter as well for recognizing and reconciling that preschool comes often too late. And that's why we laid out a strategy for a prenatal plan, recognizing the brain development that exists in the womb, not just the first 3 years where 85% of the brain development occurs, but those first 3 critical months. We recognize in this state where half of our births are Medi-Cal births, the opportunity for interventions, the family nurse partnership interventions, the interventions to address prenatally and advance, I think, a much broader scaled intervention. We also strongly believe, and you may be aware, and I know the introduction is almost up, the importance of paid family leave and the importance of those early opportunities to engage, not just mothers, but also fathers. And as you know, San Francisco has fully funded paid family leave, something we need to advance at a much broader scale in the state of California. These are the kinds of partnerships, this is the kind of investment that I am enthusiastically looking forward to engaging as your next governor, and recognizing as well the incredible power as it relates to not just front-loading education, but also beginning to have a conversation about the importance of backloading education, particularly as it relates to skills development and as it relates to the nature and change of our economy. The bottom line, and I'll close with this, is we talk about leaving people behind. But we recognize, I think all of us in this room, how many people start behind. We all, I think, recognize the importance of being ready before we have to address the achievement gap, focusing again on the readiness gap that exists. We have to change the paradigm, no longer top down, but truly bottom up, and begin anew with a different kind of strategy, a different kind of engagement of intervention. And I think we have a unique opportunity as we turn the page from the, I think, foundation Governor Brown has provided us, now moving to another level with your next governor. So again, thank you all very much. Sorry to, again, be on Skype 3,000 miles away. But again, thank you for the opportunity to engage, and I look forward to your questions. At least someone heard me, thank God.
Lieutenant Governor Louis Friedberg, Executive Director of EdSource. Your voice is coming through loud and clear. Just want to reassure you. And just to go over the ground rules real quickly, we've been allocated 15 minutes for me to ask you some questions. We're going to try to get in as many questions as we can. And then we'll go to the floor for a couple of questions. And hopefully we'll cover a lot of ground. So let me just jump in. You indicated that you're a passionate supporter for preschool for all, and it's something you did in San Francisco. Where we're at in California, as you know, progress has been made on that front, but it's kind of somewhat stalled at the moment. Current governor says we just don't have the funds to expand this to all kids, and obviously this requires some support from the state for low-income families. Where do you stand on that? Do you think would you as governor commit to preschool for all?
Yeah, I would. And let me just say this. Look, localism is determinative. And my point is about San Francisco, we didn't wait for the Schwarzenegger administration. We didn't wait around for Washington, D.C. We took responsibility. We stepped up and we stepped in. We created a set-aside, as you know, in 2004, Proposition H, and that also created a set-aside for those school enrichment programs that I was referring to. And so it's a way of answering the question. Absolutely. Am I committed to this? Yes. Why? Because it's a developmental imperative. It's not a nice to have, it's a must to have in the world we're living in. I serve on the CSU Board of Trustees, the UC Regents, the remedial questions, for 7 years. The costs of remediation, the issues of equity are front and center. And again, it's because our interventions come too late. And so we've got to create, as we say in psychology, a pattern interrupt. And we've got to focus on the root causes, not the symptoms. And that's why it's an imperative to do this. So yes, at the state level, but also trying to be resourceful and recognizing the opportunity at the local level to create the conditions that one of my children champions, Margaret Broadkin, talks so much about, where we can invite those conversations anew at the local level for set-asides, potentially to lower the thresholds in terms of those set-asides for children and youth programs, look at the local bond thresholds, et cetera, ways, strategies to begin to fund this anew. And obviously that gets to the Prop 13 conversation, it gets into the service tax conversation, and I imagine conversations that you have forthcoming perhaps in the Q&A, and I've talked to other candidates about it.
Well, where do you stand on Prop 13? Would you be willing to go back to the voters to take a look at that, particularly on the commercial role side of things?
Yeah, commercial industrial side, and that stubborn conversation we have over years and years and years around how people play the LLC, S Corp, and C Corp game in terms of a change in ownership. All those things absolutely need to be subject to conversation and debate, and I've long been out front and advancing those conversations. So the answer is yes.
Yeah. Prop 30 was kind of a landmark.
Glad there's some that agree.
Prop 30 was viewed as kind of perhaps a reversal of the California being the anti-tax state. Could you see going further with going to taxpayers to generate more revenue to fund these programs?
Look, I think there are a lot of novel proposals out there. The answer is yes. I mean, we can broaden the tax base. We can actually tax the economy that exists today, not the economy of 100 years ago, which is our current tax structure. There's been a lot of proposals even beyond, quote unquote, tax reform, and that includes the issues of oil severance tax and other opportunities to, I think, be a little bit more creative. So absolutely. Look, we're not out of the woods, and I think everybody recognizes that. And we've got some demographic challenges that all of us in this room, I'm sure, are intimately familiar with, and that's the silver tsunami that's coming in California, where over the next 10 years, our senior population is going to explode by over 78%. And that's going to put enormous pressure on our resources as people want to live in place and live in dignity and are living longer. And we want to be there for our seniors. I don't want to create the conditions where we're choosing one over the other. And so this tax reform conversation, broadening the tax base, is absolutely critical.
What about looking at also the really early years, which I think there's now widespread recognition that not just preschool, but 0 through 3, the issue of infant care and toddler care, which is even more expensive and out of reach of so many Californians. What would you do as governor to deal with those, to look at the early years?
As I made in my top of my remarks, one could argue our intervention at preschool comes too late. Brain development 0 to 3, 85%. The neuroscience is in. Billions and billions of neural connections in just the first 3 months. Again, we talk the first 3 years, but those first 3 months are even more impactful, and that's why issues of prenatal care become profoundly important. This has come home to me in a deep way. Many of you may know I have 4 young children. Youngest is 1, 3, 5, and one that just turned 8 last week. And so it was certainly brought home to me over the last decade, the power and importance of prenatal care. And as I noted, we already have the points of intervention with half of our children being born into Medi-Cal. We have extraordinary programs, as one I mentioned before, the nurse-family partnerships, the home visits, which ROI is off the chart. And so it's absolutely essential. The work that First 5 does on the talk, read, and sing, all those things are profoundly important. You need a champion, though. You need a mayor, a governor working with mayors that elevates the status of this science in a way that enlivens people to be fully participatory, not just parents, but the community in understanding the critical nature of these bottom-up interventions so that in the back, in the downstream, we're not, frankly, sort of digging upstream or sort of, interventions which are extraordinarily costly and remediation costs that don't necessarily have the outcomes that some people would like to see. It's because we simply aren't making those early investments. So I'm deeply involved and committed to prenatal care 0 to 3 in addition to preschool.
Lieutenant Governor, one of the issues, affordability, particularly in your hometown of San Francisco. One of the key issues in the whole preschool arena is how much we're paying early childcare workers and preschool teachers. What can be done? What would you do as governor to try to increase those wages, which then affects the quality, obviously, as well?
Yeah, it was a big part. And when I talk about preschool, and I know the audience, I mean, you guys have educated me, it's quality that is the key. And quality also comes with credentials, quality comes with costs. But we also know quality comes with an ROI, great outcomes. Just having access is not the end goal here. It's quality access, safe quality access. And we know our ECE. We all know our ECE. I mean, you have a bachelor degree and you're teaching preschool. I mean, quite literally, it's not figurative. You're quite literally. It's one of the lowest paid degrees in terms of credentialing that exists. In fact, I remember seeing a study, and forgive me, I'm not making this study up, it may be a year old, but it was $11.61 was the average worker pay in ECE. And we know 90+% are women, close to 50% are Hispanic. And so there's a social justice aspect to this as well. And so investing in professional development, investing in wages, and by the way, that includes childcare wages, which in San Francisco, not only did we discuss, but we substantively addressed through our Wages Plus proposal. We made the investments, we created the conditions with the public so that they understand the power and importance of this, so that when we asked them to step up and support us, they were prepared to do that. That's what we need in a governor. Not just to support these things, but to create a public narrative around these things that when we ask the public to help us, they're ready to do it. And we're not pushing against public opinion. We're actually walking and working with public opinion.
Okay, watching the time, we want to move now to K-12. The California has moved in some really major directions under the current governor, local control funding formula. We've got Common Core in place in the schools. Do you think we are on the right track, basically, in terms of the reforms that are in place in the schools?
Look, I'm a big supporter of LCFF, and I'm concerned. You know, there's a lot of pundits out there reading articles, people ready to pull the plug after just a few years. I'm not. And forgive me if I'm off my numbers, but you know, I think this year we're a little over $10 billion invested. We're going to get in the concentration and supplemental grants up to about $17 billion. We're just a few years into this. I think it's profoundly important to support this effort and exercise. As I said earlier, it's not just a slogan for me. Localism is determinative. It's a bottom-up, not top-down strategy. The power and importance of culturally competent solutions at the local level is a core value of mine, and I want to see it advanced. Obviously, we're worried about those test scores, but we're just 3 years into that. And by the way, it never gets much attention, at least didn't seem to me. There were 14 other states that actually showed a decline in their language and reading scores, which suggests maybe some deeper questions and issues. Obviously, we're worried a little bit. We wanted to see the success of the last test continue this test, but we are making progress, and I want to stay the course, but obviously address these equity and achievement issues and continue to make sure there's transparency in terms of LCSF and accountability. I mean, we're all about transparency and accountability, but we have to actually follow through on what those words mean, and I think be a little bit more aggressive in advancing those principles as well.
Issue of local control, that's kind of an ongoing discussion, debate going on in California. How much should Sacramento be prescribing to districts, particularly around the accountability provisions in the LCAPs, or how much local control really should there be? Where do you come down on that?
So if I had a sound bite of sorts, it would be this: big on what, small on how. That's the state's frame. That's the state's role. Meaning, maybe again, it's a bottom-up biased, but as a former mayor, as former county supervisor, and someone who does believe in local control, including on the charter debate, incidentally, which I offer up is an important point, I think the state should set forth large, audacious goals, provide the resources, but recognize the resourcefulness is at the local level, and the innovation and the capacity to act anew and think anew with the kind of flexibility at the local level is absolute. And so that's where I come off in terms of broad strokes on the issue of local control.
So that would continue under your governorship, the really move to devolve decision-making to the local level.
Yeah, look, I mean, it includes test score. I'm not a command and control guy, and I think, frankly, that's been one of the big problems with school reform is this top-down, not bottom-up approach. And so, yes, my foundational philosophy is a little bit different in that respect than, frankly, some leadership in the past.
Let me ask you about charter schools, another ongoing issue. A lot of tension around that currently right now, in some districts more than others. California has been pretty receptive to charter schools by and large over the years, but some concerns in some districts where there's too many charter schools, siphoning off too many kids and affecting the budgets of the district. Where do you come down? Do you think we need more controlled, or do you think California has it right where we are at the moment?
I think we got to get under the hood. Look, I'm not ideologically opposed to charter schools, and there's some extraordinary charter schools out there. But I'm all about accountability and transparency. I'll repeat what I've been saying over the last few minutes. And again, it's not just rhetorical. I mean, this is public money, and we need to be accountable to that public money. I'm square against this notion of monetizing public schools. They're not economic units. I'm vehemently opposed to private charters. And I think that we need to take a good look at some of these out-of-state charter management organizations that have come in state that are not necessarily performing as they should and are not necessarily as accountable as they should be. And so that's where I am on this. But I think it is time. There's been enough evidence of some abuse, a significant abuse and self-dealing conflicts that I think deserve some scrutiny and frankly are not getting as much as I think some of these organizations should.
Okay, let's go to the floor and get a couple of questions. I see a hand way back over there. Can we get the mic?
Good morning. My name is Barbara Gallios. I'm from San Francisco, and I am a teacher at C5 Children's School, which is a preschool which is housed inside the state building in San Francisco. Lately, we have been exploring opening a nature-based preschool. A nature-based preschool is where children are outside almost all of the day. They have them in Europe, they have them in the state of Washington. They just passed a bill allowing them. But we here in California, we cannot open full-time nature-based preschool, which it solves a ton of problems. It's great for children. The research is out there. Being outside in nature is wonderful for children. We have the natural resources. We have beautiful environment. But we're keeping our kids inside. It doesn't make sense.
Is the question for
the question is, would you support a bill similar to the one passed in Washington State that allows full-time nature-based preschools in California? Because right now, we can't do it.
God, I love it. I don't like it. It sounds fabulous. I've got some preschool kids myself. Maybe we should talk if we're successful. Yeah, no, I mean, look, it's subject to some counter arguments, but look, I mean, it's a human flourishing. I mean, that's what that's about. That's what you just expressed. And that sounds particularly wonderful. And so, yes, and I'm candidly, I love being educated. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't aware of those kinds of restrictions. And so that is absolutely something that I would look to amend.
Question over here.
Hi, my name is Julie Lowe, and I'm the president and CEO of Children's Paradise, an integrated preschool. I want to make you aware that our federal and our state programs currently provide preschool to children based upon segregation. We put Head Start here, we put state preschool there, we put AP here, and then the parents who have money can send their kids to all of these awesome schools that are in the suburbs and look 100% better than these other sites. As an innovator, I've been able to integrate these programs, but the dissonance between the programs that are happening within our state and federal and how all the requirements disagree, Title V, Title 22, Head Start, and all sorts of other barriers are keeping kids literally segregated. Actually, we're refusing to do it, but the suggestion is that we segregate these children within our own beautiful schools. How will you work to end that segregation amongst preschoolers? Because if we can never integrate preschool, how are we going to integrate our society?
Yeah, well stated. That's a fabulous question and important. I know our time's limited. Last week, it seems like a month ago, but I was down in San Jose. I had the privilege of speaking with Cadango and about 400 educators in your space. We laid out a more comprehensive framework as a way of answering your question around all the Byzantine lack of alignment in your world that goes deep into your question, and the issues of rural access and some of these not just preschool deserts, but we can also talk about childcare deserts, but also the lack of data collection, the lack of alignment to our elementary K through 12 education system, and the nature of your funding and the complexities, as you said, with Head Start and some of our state and local programs. So I'd refer you to that, but also as a point of reference, let you know this, that I am committed to trying to work through those things. And, I'll say this with love and respect. And it's not an indictment of Governor Brown. I have immeasurable appreciation for the governor. It would be an interesting opportunity. We have the opportunity next year to elect a governor that has 4 young kids, that's experiencing these realities in real time. Again, that's not just interested in these issues, but is truly passionate and committed to these issues. And having a children's cabinet, having a body within the governor's office that's working on alignment, working on connecting these dots, working on addressing the core issue that you just advanced day in and day out, not just during a legislative session, not just in response to something, but in a sustainable way, I think is profoundly important and long overdue in this state. And so I commit to you that being advanced if I'm privileged to be your next governor.
Lieutenant Governor, let me just get in one last question. Before you came on, and we heard this yesterday and today, California is not leading the nation in terms of serving its kids. It's actually way behind. Do you see a realistic way to increase this low ranking where California stands in terms of how much it spends on its kids? As governor, do you see an opportunity to really increase that ranking?
We have to.
Yeah, I mean, one specific thing about how we would actually bump it up a few rungs.
Yeah, I mean, so it's a combination of things. I framed it earlier in a different question. It's about resources, absolutely. And that's critical. I mean, we're in the bottom 10. We all have the goal to get in the top 10 per pupil investment. We have a long way to go. And I think that goes big part to the test score issue and big part, obviously, to why you've convened this forum. So the commitment is there. And that's about, obviously, finding new sources of funding, new dedicated sources of funding, looking at our tax system and seeing what we can do to make sure that Prop 98 truly is a floor. Not a ceiling, absolutely. But it's also about resourcefulness. It's also about elevating these issues top of mind in the public discourse, in the public debate. I'll end as I began. Look, the reason San Francisco was able to do that is we had champions, we had leaders. They weren't necessarily people in formal authority. They were people that had moral authority, like many of you in this room, that were leaders in your community, that created the conditions that allowed us to go to the voters and make the case for the imperative of investing, the necessity of investing in our children. And we overwhelmingly were successful in those endeavors. In 2015, recently, in 2010, in 2004, heck, we created that Children's Fund in 1991. It was a 5-year process to support that effort. And that's the kind of, again, leadership we're going to need in the state to be able to more substantively answer your question. So it's not just a rhetorical response, patronizing you by saying, of course, we're going to find more resources. It's a strategy to actually create and find those resources.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom.
Thank you all. Thanks for indulging me through Skype. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I feel more encouraged than I felt yesterday afternoon. And just a quick reminder, make a quick plug for EdSource for those of you who are already signed up for our daily email newsletter, EdSource Today, to hear about a lot of these issues we've talked about. Thank you. And for those of you who aren't, you can go to our website, edsource.org, and totally free. I'm now going to call on Kim Patil.